Welcome to the Alcohol Tipping Point podcast. I'm your host, Deb Maisner. I'm a registered nurse, health coach, and alcohol-free badass. I have found that there's more than one way to address drinking. If you've ever asked yourself if drinking is taking more than it's giving, or if you found that you're drinking more than usual, you may have reached your own alcohol tipping point. The Alcohol Tipping Point is a podcast for you to find tips, tools, and thoughts to change your drinking. Whether you're ready to quit forever or a week, this is the place for you. You are not stuck and you can change. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast. All the way from Ireland today is a special guest. Her name is Olivia Farrelly. She is a former gray area drinker who has been alcohol-free since 2008. Congratulations. Or not 2008, 2018.
No, Deb, I was drinking in 2008.
Yeah, I know, like that 10 years probably makes a pretty big difference. Olivia holds a master's in health psychology and a diploma in alcohol studies, and she is the host of the No More Booze podcast. Olivia credits removing alcohol as the single most transformational change she has ever made. Since giving up alcohol, Olivia has experienced more joy, energy, vitality, clarity, self compassion, and motivation than ever before. So, thank you for coming on the show, Olivia.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I adore talking, first of all, and I adore talking about alcohol and how giving it up has completely transformed my life. So, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I would love to hear your story. You're in Ireland, you're in Dublin now, just like
Yeah.
what drinking was like for you, what your own tipping point was, how you unwound the habit to get to where you're at now.
Yeah, so I'm a very typical story because anybody I talk to of the same age as me, I'm 43. So I came of age in the 1990s where there was a very specific alcohol centric culture in Ireland. We would have all started experimenting around 14, 15. I wasn't any different. We experimented with like alcohol pops. So, like heavily colored, heavily sugared alcohol drinks. So, luminous colors like neons and bright blues. So, I suppose that's what I first started drinking. And then there was definitely a culture of naggins of vodka, right? So, it was like quarter bottles of vodka. So, you'd buy a naggin of vodka for a fiver and go drinking with your friends. But it was very, very typical. So, did that for a couple of years. I suppose, I was shy, like most people. I was quite introverted and extroverted at the same time. But alcohol, when I drank it, it felt like something came alive within me. So all of the inhibitions went, all of the kind of feelings of less than, the awkwardness, that social anxiety, all that kind of stuff. And I felt at home with booze. I have to admit that. It felt good for a very long time. It was, I suppose, there was the occasional bad hangover, there was the occasional horrendous thing that I did, but all in all, I suppose the juice was worth the squeeze. So the benefits far outweighed the costs. So I did it successfully. Well, semi successfully, but it gave a lot at the very beginning and into my 20s. Of course, there was incidences where it didn't, and stuff happened. But like, isn't that what kind of goes hand in hand with drinking? And drank heavily in university the first time I was there. All my friends were big drinkers. We had great fun. My 20s, I went traveling a lot. So again, the backpack culture, lots of boozing on different continents. Yeah, I suppose when I came back to Ireland, then I did a master's over in the UK and came back to Ireland in my late 20s, kind of mid to late 20s. I suppose I would have had a little bit of depression looking back on it now. 2020 vision is so clear. And when I look back on it now, wasn't happy. And I suppose I used alcohol to cope. And I was using alcohol at that stage to go out and kind of meet somebody, I suppose a romantic partner, a life partner, a soulmate, which I found when I was 28. His name is Gary. And I suppose he's an incredibly, I don't want to say the word stoic, but he's a really grounded person. And I suppose he really regulated me. His calmness regulated me. So when I met him, I kind of really calmed down. I suppose there was no need for me to go out socializing as much as I did, and we were really happy. And he's not a big drinker. He still drinks, but very, very moderately, I suppose. But again, our life kind of just calmed down a lot. And then we got married and we had 2 kids. And I suppose, so my drinking was like, there was definitely bouts of very heavy drinking in my 20s. Definitely. So kind of 4 or 5 nights a week. That would have wound down when I met Gary to maybe 4 times a month. And then by the time we had kids, it was like 4 times every 4 months, so maybe once a month. But, I suppose, again, if we flip it on its head, when I was drinking then, it was far, so the costs were just outrageous in terms of, for me, internally, like, personally, psychologically, what alcohol was doing to me, it was making me really outrageously anxious. So I could have anxiety for 4, 5, 6 days. If I set an intention or if I set a goal, it would make me that goal is gone as soon as I would have a bit of alcohol. My hangovers were absolutely horrendous, like they were biblical. The shame, the regret, all these kind of things. It just wasn't working in my life at all. And it probably, by the time I gave up, I was 37 when I gave up. If I look back and be very honest, you know, it worked for a while and then it just stopped working. But if I look back now, did it stunt my development as a human? Absolutely. Did it stagnate me? Yes. Did it hold me back? Absolutely. But, I read a lot of deeply spiritual books, and one of my favorite ones is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And like he says, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. So I can't undo any of those things that have been done, but I can just accept the past and move on from it. And, when I gave up, so I did in 2017, I did a 30-day challenge, right? So I gave up for the whole month of December and actually found it quite easy. And then thought I had fixed myself, that I was grand, that I wouldn't drink in the patterns that I would drink in. And the way I described myself, when I had one, I could never stop. My body never told me when enough was enough. I drank for 23 years, and in those 23 years, my body never said, "Olivia, this is your last drink. You can never have enough." I have friends whose bodies told them, they would say, "Oh, I'm feeling too full," or "I'm that's not good for me, and I'm done now." My body never once. And all those thousands of times that I went out and I drank alcohol, it never told me once when enough is enough. But anyway, that's when I gave up for those 30 days, I thought I was fixed. And I thought, now my body will tell me when enough is enough. But as we know, if you're an all or nothing drinker or a gray area drinker, what happens is you can never just have one. And I could never just have one. And yeah, so I stopped and started for about 7 months after that. And then there came a time where I just went absolutely mad at a wedding in Spain and drank far too much. Hangover and the effects of it were so horrendous that it was the last. It literally was the last. I couldn't do it anymore. And that's what happened. I just said it out loud and I was like, I cannot do that anymore. And that was the last time I drank. So it's coming up, it's nearly, well, it's 6 years and like 3 months now at this stage. But I have another, no, I know for sure I will never have another drink again, Jeff.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing your experience. I think it was interesting you were talking about like the alcohol-centric culture for teens in the
Yeah.
90s
Mm,
for which I thought was I've definitely grew up much the same way, drinking in my teens and college and whatnot. But I we didn't have as much marketing like it sounds like you did, like those
mm.
Alco Pops you said,
Yeah.
those shiny, beautiful drinks. Would you say, like, things were getting specifically marketed towards teens or
Without a doubt. Yeah, so they were, like, so sweetly flavored. You could get strawberry flavored,
Mhm.
pineapple flavored. Like, we used to say that, "Oh, they're not even a drink, they're a mixer for, like, your spirit." So we used to use them as, like, a mixer for vodka. Yeah, so, oh, it was definitely, when you look at it now, who else would drink it? Only teenagers, or I suppose it's how you train people in to start drinking. But yeah, they were very, very, there was the brands, there was like Woodies and Hooch and Cardi Breezer and all those kind of ones, but they were definitely targeted towards early drinkers, let's say.
Mhm. Yeah, that's super interesting. And then as you were talking and sharing your story just about like you got to the point where you maybe weren't drinking daily, but when you did drink, it was over drinking, it was binge drinking,
Yeah.
right? You didn't have that off switch.
Never, never, absolutely never. And I nearly went up a gear. And I always found after the third drink, that's when it really kind of escalated. That's when I loved the feeling of the third drink, but I could never stop at the third drink, no matter how hard I tried. It was physiological, it felt, there was something outside of, I suppose, my conscious control, that there was a physiological need for more drink. That's the way I kind of have looked back at it now. But I definitely romanticized alcohol, and I suppose our culture here in Ireland is that it does no harm. And I suppose that was the narrative for a long time, that, oh, sure, it's part of who we are, it's part of our culture, we drink heavily. And but thought it was sophisticated, and definitely, I suppose, moved on to like fancy things like wine. And we definitely have a lot of, if you drink wine, you're sophisticated. If you drink, you know, cider in a park, you're not. But that's just perceptions, isn't it? It's all the same as it goes down. But yeah, I romanticized it in the way that it was, part of my personality. It helped me access parts of my personality. And I suppose now, on the flip side of it, and loads of people say this, and it's been my experience. So alcohol free gives me everything that alcohol promised. So, like, in doing the work, so we allow alcohol to, uh, we rely on it to give us confidence, or make us more socially acclimatized to a situation. And when we remove it, then we as a human have to become all of those things. So we have to become brave and courageous, and step into uncomfortable places, and step into our power and our potential as well. And I've uncovered a lot of potential, latent potential, that I didn't know I had, and that I suppose was veiled by alcohol. And having removed it, the clarity, and the energy and the vitality and the productivity that I've unearthed has allowed me to kind of step into places that I would never step into ordinarily. And that it's not just my experience. Like, I could tell you 100 people who I know, or whose stories I've listened to or spoke about, that they experience the exact same thing. And that's the thing, it's not just me or you. This happens to everybody. Everybody advantages. And it's just about holding tight until you start experiencing those yourself.
Yeah, holding tight. Well, what I loved and I think is important about your story and sharing about how you weren't a daily drinker, but you still romanticized about it, thought about it when you did drink, you overdrink. Like it can look so different on everybody. And I think we compare ourselves to other people a lot and compare ourselves to the person drinking in the park or the person who drinks every day. And we think like, oh, well, I don't drink every day. I must be okay. Or even if I am drinking, maybe I'm only having 2 or 3 glasses a night. And that's not a lot compared to all these other people around me. And it's just so personal. It's like, what does it look like for you? Is it a problem for you? Instead of focusing on what's going around in the soup around you.
Absolutely. And that's what I always say about myself. Like, I don't look like a problematic drinker, right? And a lot of my friends would have, people around me would have said, "You're a grand, would you stop?" I have the opinion that if alcohol is causing problems for you, then it's a problem. and it caused problems for me internally. And having been off it for over 6 years now, I can look back and say and pinpoint exactly where the problems were, because I've had so much freedom and clarity and joy and passion and all those things since not having a drink, that I know that alcohol caused all of those problems. Like I haven't got into a sticky situation. I haven't said anything I didn't mean. I haven't done anything I regret. I haven't blacked out, and I haven't done that since I haven't had a drink. So the drink caused all those, and not me. And I think that's a really important point as well. Like in the culture that we live in, you know, we blame the drinker and not the drink, right? So, like, I haven't done anything to cause me shame or regret in 6 years. I did loads of shit that caused me shame or regret in the years that preceded that. So, the only difference is that I drank alcohol then and I don't now. So, I'm fully in control of who I am now. And I don't do things that cause upset to me or cause upset to other people now. So, it wasn't ever me. It was just the way in which I drank. So, it was the drink. You know, I suppose all this clarity and joy, and for me anyway, the clarity was the thing that made it extra nice. So, waking up on a Sunday morning after a wedding on a Saturday and having no regrets, remembering how I got to bed, having taken my makeup off, or not waking up in the dress that I wore the night before, just becoming more intentional with my life. That's been the biggest catalyst, I suppose, that clarity that you can do absolutely anything. And it definitely felt like freedom for the first couple of years as well, that I was free from, I suppose, the prison that was of my own creation. And now it genuinely keeps getting better every year. And there's still so much joy. I was out on Friday night, and even like I had a fabulous time. And I even suppose now, after 6 years, I'm still discovering things that I like to do more and more and more, and just becoming a better version of myself, more confident, more regulated. That's another added bonus, even way down the line. So prior to those kind of initial months of it being great, but it's still great 6 and a bit years down the line too.
Yeah. So how did you quit then? How did you unravel this habit?
Yeah. So I suppose I definitely it felt like a real spiritual experience for me. So I feel that it was maybe aided by something bigger than myself. So I had an incredible determination, probably a determination like I'd never had before. But so I know now that when we take alcohol out, we have to put other things in. So looking back, I got really into exercise. So I was doing a lot of hit exercise, and that definitely got me out of my body. I read an awful lot. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I did a lot of kind of mindfulness work. So I did a lot of meditation, did a lot of journaling. I'm the self help queen. So I would have self helped myself to rid myself of a lot of behaviors. And so I definitely would have reached for the books. So I was doing a lot of the work, noticing patterns in myself. So there was a lot of that kind of self-awareness stuff going on, a lot of journaling, a lot of questioning. Therapy as well was really good. I did a lot of Reiki healing. For me anyway, lots of stuff came up around shame, and the shame for things that I had done and ways in which I had behaved as well. So I definitely thought that Reiki was a really, really positive tool for me to get rid of a lot of that shame. And I do the work all the time now. And a practice, I suppose, that I'm focusing on for myself at the minute is this area of like radical self acceptance. So to really truly accept me, my flaws, my imperfections, and I suppose to reflect a bit of love back to myself. And that's I'm very early into that process, but that's going to be something I'm going to be working on now for the next couple of months, personally and with the help of a therapist. But yeah, no, I find books and audiobooks and podcasts, they were absolutely invaluable. And it's the vulnerabilities of other people. When other people share their darkest times, then we feel seen. that if somebody experiences the same as we do, then inherently we might not be as bad as is our worst imaginings of ourselves, you know? So yeah, it took a while, but I suppose I would imagine looking back now, I'd say after about 3 years, I knew I was done for good. You know, that
Yeah.
my life was so incredibly enriched by not drinking that I knew for sure that I would never drink again.
And you just went a more of your own making, like, you didn't do a program, you didn't join a group, you didn't go to AA, you didn't,
No.
which I think is great. I think more and more people are doing putting together what works for them and what
Yeah.
they need. Some people need the connection and they need other people. Like, you got a lot out of that just by reading stories and listening to the podcasts and working on yourself at the same time. You had a therapist also, so you weren't completely alone. Do you remember some of, like, the books or podcasts that stood out to you?
Yeah, so the first book I read was The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was a phenomenal one for me. And then I love Drink by Anne Dowsett Johnson. That really opened my eyes. And that's a phenomenal book as well. I love Drink by Professor David Nutt. That was a real, oh, what else? Kick the Drink Easily was one that I did. I think that's Jason Vale. And there was another lady, an Australian lady, I read her book early on. It was called The Social Rebellion. Maz Compton was her name. So they were the kind of early stuff that I had read. And podcasts, it's just different people, I suppose, on podcast. Andy Ramage was whenever he appeared on a podcast, I would tune into that kind of thing. But it was a very different landscape back in 2017, 18. There wasn't this whole kind of sober curiosity going around the place. I suppose that has definitely sped up in the last couple of years, but definitely I think it was a bit of a barren ground back then. There wasn't many people talking about it compared to what there is now, you know. But yeah, I felt that I do a lot of the work by Dr. Nicola Pera. So I would still do a lot of her. I read a lot of her work, and she's an incredible workbook as well that I do a lot of work with as well. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So when you gave it up, like, what was the reaction around people around
Yeah,
you?
that I was melodramatic. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that
right.
I was they were like, "You're grand, you're fine." But it was internally, like, I suppose I would have looked fine, let's say on a night out. It was a very social thing. So myself and Gary at home here would have never been massive home drinkers. So, you know, maybe the odd bottle of wine every second weekend or every third weekend. But there wasn't, I suppose, a culture of the two of us doing, you know, drinking every Friday and Saturday night either. So it was easy not to drink at home, and we had young kids, so we were rarely going out. So I suppose alcohol would have kind of petered out as well. Um, what was your question there? Sorry, my
Well,
train of
just,
thought
like,
is
when
gone.
you gave it back, like,
Yes,
what the reaction was around you,
I'm sorry.
and then
Yes,
kinda moving into, like, I mean, now it's becoming more and more
yes,
acceptable to be sober curious, to
yeah,
take breaks and whatnot. Yeah, just kinda
yeah.
sharing about the evolution of
Yeah.
that.
Sorry, my perimenopause brain took over there. Like, I'm in the middle of perimenopause and the brain fog is unbelievable. It's funny because I'm 43 now and I gave up at 37, and I was having such a gorgeous run of things. And now I've hit this kind of brain fog wall and I'm like, oh, I can't even talk barely.
I'm
Um,
there with you.
yeah, but yeah, so but what happened then? So I think personally, what I think is the pandemic created an avalanche of at home drinkers, problematic drinkers, people who began to rely too heavily on the wine at home. And then, as nearly an offshot for that, people increasing their alcohol consumption over then and then realizing it's an absolute waste of time. that then this that's my own opinion, that's my own musings on it, that that's what gave birth to this sober curious movement as well. Plus, people are more health conscious, and there's more studies coming out about the health harms associated with alcohol. So, I suppose we're of an age where we were heavily marketed to, and our entire generation, and the people I see around me would have drank an awful lot. And then they're at an age now in their kind of 40s going, now I'm choosing something different. I want something different. And, a lot of my friends are alcohol free at the minute. And so it's definitely a thing. And there was a report published a couple of weeks ago here in Ireland by the Drinks Industry Group of Ireland. And they reported that alcohol consumption has decreased by 31% since 19.
Oh,
We're,
you cut
we,
out for a second. Since
oh,
when?
yeah.
It's decreased 31%?
31% since 1987. So our alcohol consumption in Ireland has been decreasing a huge amount. And now that we have this kind of sober curious movement here. So people are just, they're done. They know that they have better things to be doing, that there's more clarity, productivity, better moods. And I suppose there's a lot more availability of 0 drinks and non-alcoholic drinks, and people are just choosing that instead. So it's great to see, because when you go out, you have a lot of friends. I live outside in the suburbs of Dublin, and we had like a party at the all our neighbors had a kind of party there during the summer, and only a couple of weeks ago, and I'd say 70% of people were drinking 0 at it. Yeah,
Wow, that's
yeah,
amazing. What a
yeah.
wonderful shift. I think that is a good point. Like the pendulum really swung one way. And that point about the pandemic, like there were more and more people drinking at home alone, more and more quote unquote normal drinkers that were like, whoa, something's happening here. Like I'm developing a problem or reliance on alcohol. I need to shift the other way now. And so it took an increase in, gray area drinkers, let's just say, to really shift it away to like this awareness of drinking and this curiosity and this willingness to change. And then also, yeah, all the health reports, all the new data, and just recognizing like how much we had been marketed to.
Yeah, and hoodwinked.
Right. And then you're kind of mad. You're like, that's
Yeah,
enough. That's enough.
yeah, and I definitely got angry at one stage, and it was Dysa Johnson's book that I was reading, and I was like, "What? Oh my god!" I was raging, because when I grew up, I felt like I didn't have a choice to drink. There was no choice there. It was like everybody was drinking. So there was no choice. And I suppose there was an idea that people who didn't drink were boring and nobody wanted to be around them. And so you kind of had to drink to be good fun. Whereas now it's totally different. I see loads of young people, and they definitely don't drink in the same passions that we do. And I think social media has a definite effect on that, in that back in the day we would have uploaded 87 pictures to Facebook of drinking, Jaeger bombs, and thinking we were great, looking like hell. But now it's just not, you would never do that. And if they don't like, if young people don't like to look out of control, whereas we loved it.
Do you has Ireland come out with new drinking guidelines like Canada? Because I heard that Ireland was actually on the list of countries to change their drinking guidelines.
Not their guidelines, not to my knowledge now, but what they are implementing is warning labels on alcohol products. So that's coming out in 2026. So yeah, but I must look that up, but I haven't heard of something like that.
Yeah, yeah, just curious. I wanna shout out to another you were talking about books, and one of my favorite books is by an Irish author, Kate Gunn. Have you had
Yes,
her The
yes,
Accidental Soberista?
yes. I had
Oh,
Kate on my podcast.
me too. I was like, "I'm
Yes,
sure she knows Kate."
yeah,
what a wonderful book. This book kinda reminds me of Claire Pooley's The Sober
yes,
Diaries,
yeah.
but I just appreciate seeing the cultural changes across the world really, but how wonderful to see it in Ireland.
Absolutely. And in Ireland, where we are internationally renowned as being very bingy and big drinkers and all the rest. So, having, I suppose, that shift in culture is phenomenal, and it's people accessing potential as well and up leveling and becoming better versions of themselves. And as well as I do, when you give up alcohol, it is the greatest journey of self discovery. You become the most incredible version of yourself, you know? And I have become the most incredible version in comparison to who I was maybe 10 years ago. It's just incrementally, I get better and better every day, every month, every year that passes. And for me, one of the things that is really important to me is that I grow and evolve. And nothing has accelerated my growth and evolution like giving up alcohol has. Yeah, it's just amazing.
A Amen. Amen. So how did you decide? Because 'cause you're still working, you said you work your day job in education,
Yeah.
and then you started this podcast, and
Yeah.
so where are you at with helping other people? What does that look like for
Yeah.
you?
So I decided, I think it was 2 years ago, to return to university. So I went back and completed a diploma in alcohol studies, adored it, did really well, and decided to help people. So I have designed and delivered interventions for the past 18 years. So that was a skill of mine. So I decided intervention based on all of the things that had helped me. So I deliver them to people. So I do a group mentoring program once per month. So it's a month long program for people who want to remove alcohol. So it's an online program. And yeah, so I've been delivering that for about a year and a half. And then last year, you know yourself, like you've a podcast, it was a pipe dream for a while. And then I put it on the vision board. And then I met somebody and she was like, "Oh my God, you're so going to do the podcast. And I'm going to be your first guest." So that was Anya O'Neill. And I started a podcast 9 months ago. And yeah, have churned out an episode almost every week since. And it's been doing really well. So yeah, that's, I suppose, I, in Ireland, there wasn't a lot of Irish voices talking about alcohol and talking about, I suppose, not rock bottom drinking. So, the kind of inverted commas, normal drinking or drinking that looked like everybody else's. So, started the podcast and have got loads of guests, and it's from all over the world. But a lot of the voices and a lot of the stories are from Irish people. And yeah, it's doing great and delighted to be helping people. When I'm sure, like yourself, I get messages every single day from people saying, I've given up alcohol and I love hearing your stories, and all your guests give me hope that all the great things are on my way. And so it's been a journey of lots of different things and learning something new every single day. And that's what I enjoy, and it's been really beneficial.
That's wonderful. Now, when you use the word intervention, I feel like that means something else to us. So, because you
Oh,
said you've been
okay.
designing interventions, and I
Oh,
think of
yeah,
intervention
yeah.
as, going in and you have a problem, we need to get you off to rehab.
No,
But what do
no.
you mean by interventions?
Oh, like, sorry. So I suppose, a skills-based program. So an intervention would be, yeah, it's not like we're not pulling and dragging people out of homes. No, it's a
Got it.
program to, I suppose, to upskill, or a skill development program. Yeah, it's not like it's not, we're not removing people and bringing them.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what
So
I figured when you were talking. I was like, I'm just going to clarify.
yeah, absolutely. No, I suppose it's just it's a pattern interrupter. It's I suppose a specifically designed program to target a specific a specific behavior that people want to change.
Mm. And so you've worked in a lot of different areas where you help people change.
Yeah.
What do you think is what makes someone successful when they're making a change? I mean, this is obviously about drinking, but it could be applied to any behavioral change, right? What are some of the things that could make someone more successful?
Yeah, I suppose a readiness to change would be a clear indicator if people are ready to put certain things into practice. So a great way for people to change would be if they can listen to podcasts, read, educate themselves, to gather knowledge, to empower themselves. I suppose a supportive environment that the people around them support them, a willingness to change as well. A great indicator too is, if you developed a practice of self awareness, so you're able to identify certain patterns in your life. You want to change, you want to examine the role that alcohol it has in your life. You're looking to kind of untangle. And I suppose the romanticizing piece as well, that you can kind of see through that you're kind of ready for something different and you're ready to invite in change.
Yeah, and I think that the romanticizing, like, can go the other way. Instead of romanticizing drinking, like, romanticize your alcohol-free life, which you've,
That's
like,
it.
so wonderfully shared in so many different ways and words about just how much better you are.
Without it, absolutely. And it's not just me. Every single person who's given up drink will tell you the exact same thing, that your life, I suppose your life satisfaction increases considerably because you're more clear and you're more consistent. And that consistency piece as well is really, really important as well. And I suppose a willingness to do the work then. And people talk about the work, like what is the work? But to explore different avenues, things like emotional regulation. And I know that was massive for me, looking at how I responded or reacted to certain situations, and developing a lot of skills then to become calmer, less reactive, more in tune with myself, more in tune with my intuition, and that I'm able to access, my higher self and to become the best version of me. So it is definitely in terms of like personal growth and personal development, it has been just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what would you say to someone who was listening and they feel stuck or they're struggling or
Yeah.
they're just kind of waiting to start. They're almost there. What would you say?
Almost there. Like, be compassionate with yourself as well and take it slow. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. It didn't for me. I kind of fell off the wagon a few times. And when you fall off the wagon, we see it as failure, but it's not failure. It's giving us feedback. We're learning something every single time that we in inverted commas fail. But like when we fail, we learn so much more than when we succeed. I definitely think there's a lot more learning in failure than there is in success. But to definitely take your time with it, to be compassionate to yourself, keep getting back up on that wagon, learn as much as you can, try and, get a bit of support wherever you can, access that. We have a wealth of knowledge in our fingertips every day, like in terms of our phones, when we can use those as sources of education. Specifically, there's a lot of apps as well out there that are really, really helpful. And I think as well, just being really truthful with yourself. I felt like I did a lot of journaling at the beginning, and, just Google a journaling prompt to help you and get all those feelings out on a piece of paper, and really look at I suppose, your attitude and your belief and your habits, and see where that they have brought you, and then untangling from, I suppose, the conditioning as well that we all grew up in, that alcohol is a need. We need to have it. We need to have it to celebrate. Yeah, it's definitely a process of untangling from this culture that we've all found ourselves in.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and leading with the self-compassion and slowness and take your time. It does take a while to untangle. It's taken decades to get to where you're at, and it's gonna take some time to untangle it, and being
Yeah.
kind to yourself in the process is so, so important. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and doing what you're doing. How can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Grey Area Drinker, or I have a website. It's www.grayareadrinker.ie.
And then you have your podcast.
Oh, sorry, I have a podcast. It's called No More Booze. You
No
can
more
find me
booze.
where No
Yeah.
More Booze. Yeah, sorry. I forget about these things. Yeah, so No More Booze is a podcast, and you find it wherever podcasts you listen to your podcast. So, Apple or Spotify or wherever.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was great to meet you, and I look forward to connecting more and coming on your show and
Excellent.
all that we can do to help people recognize like this is a joyful, juicy, alcohol-free life and it is worth it and you are so worth it.
Like, it's so worth it. It is, and I say this with a lot of enthusiasm. Giving up alcohol is the greatest thing that I have ever done.
Mm.
Yeah,
Same, same.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Alcohol Tipping Point podcast. Please share and review the show so you can help other people too. I want you to know I'm always here for you, so please reach out and talk to me on Instagram at Alcohol Tipping Point and check out my website, alcoholtippingpoint.com, for free resources and help. No matter where you are on your drinking journey, I want to encourage you to just keep practicing, keep going. I promise you are not alone and you are worth it. Every day you practice not drinking is a day you can learn from. I hope you can use these tips we talked about for the rest of your week, and until then, talk to you next time.